Broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Welcome everyone to today's webinar on activity-based workplace from an IoT perspective. My name is Colette Temmink. I'm the Chief Strategy and Product Officer for a company called Blue Skyer. I also have the pleasure of serving on the IFMA Global Board. So just as a reminder, and we appreciate everybody's input, please, if you have questions, enter them in the chat section and we will try to get to those at the end of the session. But really appreciate your participation. We also have a few polls throughout today's webinar, which will give you an opportunity to provide your feedback and insights as well. So with me today, I have two experts and leaders in activity-based working. So with me is Lisa Barclay, who's the Worldwide Product Management Director for IBM Tririga at IBM, and John Wang, who's the CEO and co-founder of IAdea. So if each of you could please introduce yourselves, that would be terrific. Why don't we start with you, Lisa?
Thanks, Colette. Hello, everyone. Excited to be here with you today for this discussion. I'm the Product Management Director for IBM Tririga, which is our integrated workplace management solution. My background is in software development across IBM's portfolio. And over the last 5 years, I've been working on the use of IoT technologies in the built environment and how that can positively impact the occupant experience, as well as making facility operations more efficient. John?
Yes. Yeah, thank you, Colette and Lisa. Very happy to be here. My name is John Wang, CEO and co-founder of IAdea. We're a company founded in year 2000, focusing on using IoT technologies to help businesses transform their physical spaces. There's more than 500,000 of IAdea devices deployed worldwide, and we have offices in North America and Asia. So I started the company with the first 10 years focused mostly on using digital signage to help retailers improve their shopper experience. And nowadays, we're primarily focused on the workplace, and we've deployed tens of thousands of room booking panels for large and small businesses worldwide. So I'm really very excited to be here to share some of our findings and hope it will be helpful to the audience.
Perfect. Thank you both. So as I mentioned, we're excited to be here today on the topic of activity-based workplace from an IoT perspective. And as many of you know, activity-based working really accepts that individuals perform different activities throughout their workday and consequently need a variety of different work settings and technologies to enable their productivity and just their day-to-day activities. So before we begin with a discussion of, the workplace and how that's changed, why don't we turn to the participants? We have our first poll, so please engage, but we really want to hear from you around what's the status of your plans for changing or transforming the workplace. If you could please mark one of the three categories, that would be terrific. Okay. So interesting. So many of you are already currently in the process. So this is a timely webinar for you. So again, appreciate your participation. So why don't we go ahead and begin our discussion with the panelists today on how really IoT enables the activity-based workplace and why activity-based workplace is becoming ever more relevant to organizations. So Lisa, why don't we start with you? As companies are planning and bringing people back to the workplace, what types of environments are customers really exploring from what you've seen?
Yeah, one thing the pandemic's really shows is that people can work from anywhere. People may or may not prefer to work from the office, but because of this change, people are now having to view the office more as a destination, like the workplace as a destination, a place that people will want to go back to. Why would people want to go back to the office? It really depends on what a person needs to do. You have to give them a reason to be there or provide them something that they don't have in other locations where they could also possibly work. So it might be that people have a specific task to do or need a place to collaborate or hold workshops or a place for face-to-face meetings, either with one person or with many, or even a place to work independently in a quiet place or to have access to certain tools of the trade. So this has caused a real need for the workplace to be about flexible dynamic spaces that can change as the needs of the business and the workforce change. And so because of that, the workplace, the definition of that's really never going to look the same to what we were used to. Workplaces now need to be about flexible dynamic spaces that can change with the needs of the business and the workforce change. And our customers are exploring a variety of new approaches. One of the biggest challenges is the shift from the premise that each person will work in an office for 8 hours a day, 5 days a week. Most companies are now anticipating that people will be in the office 2 to 3 days a week and will work somewhere else the remainder of the time, or even go to the office only for half days for a specific purpose or a meeting. This causes a real shift from assigned workplaces to hoteling, where you can reserve a desk in advance, or to hot desking, where people can select an available desk upon arrival. And that's if they even need a desk at all for the type of task that they've gone to the office to perform. Another shift that we're seeing is an increased focus on collaboration spaces instead of individual workspaces, where the size and the nature of the collaboration space may need to be dynamic. And there's also a focus on spaces for casual interaction, resurrecting the idea that chats around the water cooler, because social interaction is one of the key motivators for many people to come back to the office after being stuck at home for so long. So the themes running through the different options are the tasks the employee needs to do, who they need to do it with, the kind of space and tools they can best perform that task with, and how to make this an experience that will draw the employee back to the office.
Yeah, I can't reiterate that more. I think most are really evaluating how to bring people back, right, in a way that they want to come back to the office. And I know we're going to touch upon that even later in the webinar, really ideas around that. But John, Lisa brought up some great points, specifically around the pandemic. So, how has the pandemic really introduced changes to the workplace? And will it require new technologies, and what can those technologies address?
Sure. Yeah, I think Lisa very well defined what the activity-based workplace is going to do for the team after the pandemic passes. If you look at survey results, as many as 70% of the employees are looking forward to spending most of their week in the office. And the number one reason they name for going back to the office is for teamwork, as Lisa also touched on. However, on the flip side, there is still a lot of concerns among the employees. Number one being the health concerns, whether it is safe for them. Because right now, it's no longer a requirement for them to be in office 5 days a week. It's an option. So they want to engage with their colleagues. They want to reconnect and build a corporate culture. But at the same time, it's important to make them feel safe. We feel that technology can definitely provide a solution there. And also, when employees choose to go back to the office, they're expecting a high quality work experience, better than they could get from home. And here, technology will be able to provide frictionless access to spaces, allowing the employees to see, for example, room availability, work desk availability right from a distance, so they could head directly to areas that's been cleaned and it's not reserved by another person, and feel safe and feel comfortable fitting into that space. And also, another way technology can help to make employees feel safe is, for example, provide transparency around data in the workplace. For example, the occupancy count, how many people are in the building, to make sure that when they enter the building, it's not overcrowded, that they're able to keep sufficient social distance. So it's providing that information using technology can give employee that confidence that it is safe for them to be back in the workplace again.
Terrific. So really around teamwork and technology. Great feedback from both of you. So let's discuss what technologies that you both think will be required really to better implement the activity-based workplace. So Lisa, why don't we start with you again, if you don't mind? How do facility managers determine what tools they need, as they start their journey with activity-based?
Yeah, well, there's no one size fits all answer. There's definitely a lot of different tactics you can deploy to help you determine what software tools and IoT devices and data that you need to introduce to let you effectively plan for and manage your activity-based workplace. You need to think about how you're integrating, for example, with your HR team to focus on the new workforce needs. Facility managers are no longer just focused on operating and maintaining buildings and are having to shift focus to the entire experience across the different functional areas of the business, including the CIO team, HR, and workplace safety, as John was mentioning. So, you've got to think about how are you going to reserve spaces, assign seats, and create first come, first served spaces. And then also, what about collaboration areas for different type of activities? Do you need more traditional meeting spaces, or do you need something more open for things like design thinking workshops? And then also, what about bringing people back to different buildings that they might be unfamiliar with? Do they need tools to help them find their way around? And then also thinking about what are your cleaning and health and safety protocols? How are you integrating those into your day-to-day operations? So if you focus first on the end goal, the positive and safe experience that you want for the occupants and the underlying services that you need to make that happen, this can really steer your choice of tools based on those goals. And then deploying robust software can not only support the different styles of desk and room reservations, but can also report on the expected occupancy levels and managing the cleaning schedules, for example, which can help you achieve multiple goals with one software tool. You can also bring your IoT data into your operations to help improve the workplace experience and overall safety of your occupants, such as using the occupancy sensors and possibly Wi-Fi data to monitor the real-time occupancy, which you can then use that to allow occupants to choose spaces that either have more or less people in them, depending on what they're looking for, as well as being able to monitor spaces that are too crowded for physical distancing so that you can take action on that. Integrating interactive indoor maps with wayfinding can also assist people in finding their way around new spaces and new buildings or areas of the buildings they didn't previously work in. And then if you want, you can take that a step further and introduce beacons if you want to be able to take wayfinding to the next level of having that blue dot experience that people are used to having when they're walking around outdoors with GPS and Google Maps. So, overall, our job is to guide facility managers on selecting the right technologies and evolving the tools so that you can build resiliency into your facilities management strategies.
Yeah, resiliency, it's so important, even in today's environment with ESG and, global warming and all the topics that are top of mind for many CRE executives. It also brings up a good discussion around technology, as you alluded to, right? And you touched upon that in your answer. But John, can you give us some scenarios in which, IoT technology can address the needs of activity-based workplace?
Sure. Yeah, I think one of the problems that companies are trying to solve using IoT technology, especially after the COVID, is to improve their space utilization. A lot of companies have cut down their corporate real estate during the pandemic, and now they're trying to bring people back. So the first problem is, how do you fit so many people in less space and do so safely? So IoT here can really provide insights into how space is being used, and together with a scheduling system, be able to optimize that space usage. So a number of devices can improve that experience during that process of moving through the office. For example, as I mentioned earlier, we deploy a lot of room scheduling panels. And these are small screens outside of meeting rooms that have colorful lights on the side that clearly indicate whether a room it's in use, where it's available, or it has a reservation on it that people will be coming into the space in a few minutes. So employees looking for a space to go in and have a meeting can clearly identify the space that's available to them. And in an activity-based workplace, this applies not just to meeting rooms. Basically, any kind of collaboration space can be helpfully identified using some kind of availability light. We've seen that being applied to desks in the desk hoteling experience. And also there are design considerations. You want lights to clearly indicate spaces that are available, but at the same time, you don't want them to disturb people trying to concentrate on their work. One of my clients were joking about having Christmas lights around their office, blinking all the time. So technology can definitely help optimize the space utilization there. Another thing that is a lot of companies are considering during this process of going back is to provide touchless ways to interact with the office equipment, namely these screens that people were supposed to touch and interact with to book into rooms. So here, a number of technologies are available. For example, instead of touching on a screen to check into rooms, now you could use a scanner to scan your ID badge, for example. There are also QR code scanners, so cameras optimized for picking up QR codes. And we also work with a number of security enhanced ID card providers, to provide virtual cards, so you can use your mobile phone to check into spaces as well. So these are all different ways IoT are helping to streamline the workspace after COVID. One area Colette also touched on earlier is around sustainability, around energy conservation. Because nowadays, now you have all the data about occupancy, about schedule. You could really save a lot of energy utilizing these data streams. Well, there's a survey that finds that 1 in 3 people notice that either HVAC or screens and projectors are not turned off after meetings. And these devices consume as much as 30% of the energy in the building. And there are also research findings saying between 30 to 50% of energy savings can be achieved simply by deploying occupancy sensors. So when people are out of the rooms, you turn off the electricity for the HVAC and for lightings. So these are all technologies that can be integrated in the post-COVID workplace, where we're expecting possibly a higher utilization rate per space, but at the same time, we want to make sure we do it in a sustainable way that saves energy and keeps everyone in the environment safe.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great point. It's almost a win-win, right? You're getting a great employee experience, and there's certainly operational efficiencies, right, across the board if you really harness that data and capture that. So now it gives us another opportunity to ask our audience. So let's turn to the next poll, if we could, really around what types of workplaces currently exist in your workplace. Okay, hopefully we can see there, but interesting results. So phone booths, individual spaces, and conference rooms. 0 on outdoor spaces and 18% on open lounge areas. So we really are seeing, at least from these results, kind of this balance between individual space and spaces where they can collaborate. Terrific. Well, since we're fortunate to have you two experts on the panel that actually have real world experience around AW and activity-based kind of workplaces, you know, I'd be remiss not to ask questions around kind of new challenges, right? And solutions for facility managers who want to adopt IoT for their environments. So what advice would you give facility managers who are evaluating space planning technology or activity-based workplace? So John, let's start with you this time if we could. You know, what are some of the pitfalls regarding selecting IoT technologies that you find common amongst your clients?
I think as Lisa also touched on earlier, a lot of these evaluations are driven by technologists who either too quickly converge on either too much technology or too little technology. So it's really important to start with the goals in mind. And you know, I think it's easy to imagine why you could have too much energy. Too much technology. But sometimes if you don't spend enough time evaluating your options, you could end up with too little or insufficient technology that ends up costing the organization a lot of money. I could give you one exact example. We have a global client who are looking into having room scheduling panels for their meeting rooms, and there is more than 6,000 meeting rooms in that organization across the globe. And very quickly, they decided to go forward with a simple consumer tablet because it's easy to acquire across the globe globally. And also the software, it seems that there are multiple software options available for the tablet device. What ended up happening is that very quickly, just a few months after deployment, they ran into very serious safety risks where the battery built into the panels started swelling due to a continuous charging. At that time, they consulted a few companies, and we were selected as the vendor for them to really deploy professionally designed devices that are designed for 24/7 operation, and will solve a number of problems that they were facing. As I mentioned earlier, a continued charging battery swells after a while, and also the fact that these consumer devices often rely on unreliable Wi-Fi for networking, and these can be intermittent, and it's a large cost to try to stabilize that Wi-Fi connectivity. And also these devices are not easily mounted, especially on glass walls. You can imagine there is not sufficient mounts for them to be mounted securely and prevent them from being stolen in some locations. So I think it's quite important that early on during the evaluation process that you're looking to, well, number one, you start with the goals in mind, and you spend enough due diligence looking at your options. And the simplest answer sometimes is not the best answer, and really speak with people who have the experience of doing it on large scale to make sure that you pick the right technology.
Yeah, I mean, great point. So Lisa, really, what tactics are working and not working? And really, what are facility managers facing and challenges with implementing and maintaining the software, right? So it's great once you've selected that software, but then you have to implement that, you have to maintain that. So, really around maintaining the software and hardware, which can get fairly expensive, correct? So what advice would you give for those facility managers?
Yeah, building upon what John was saying, what's working is really prioritizing your technology needs based on the problems you're trying to solve. Focusing on the right technology that helps you build the flexible workplace that your business needs. It's also about using the tools that you already have and looking at extending their use for new scenarios. While there's lots of solutions out there that solve one specific problem, like room booking or occupancy monitoring, facility managers can achieve greater success with integrated solutions that solve a set of problems, like replanning their space, managing their capital projects, and right-sizing their real estate needs, along with looking at the room booking and the occupancy monitoring. And it's usually more expensive to pull together a bunch of separate solutions and try to force them to work together, rather than using an integrated solution that can do all of the things that you need. Also, you need to think about right-sizing the solution. For example, do you really need to monitor whether each chair is occupied, or is it sufficient for what you're trying to do to monitor the occupancy of the space by floor, or can you select certain areas where you need more granular occupancy data? Another consideration is whether are you in a modern building that has great ventilation, or are you in an older facility where you need to monitor something like air quality much more carefully. So, the best advice is don't spend a lot of money putting sensors everywhere for things like occupancy and air quality if you don't have a plan for what you're going to do with that data. The data from the sensors is invaluable when you have got a way to use it. So you've really got to focus on the goal you're trying to solve. What information do you need to do that? And then picking the right vendors to work with. So because each company's needs are somewhat unique, so your solutions have to be then tailored to meet the goals that you're trying to achieve.
Perfect. So now we've talked about kind of really the overall program and some of the challenges. Why don't we touch upon best practices for the audience? So, John, why don't we start with you again? Where have you seen really success amongst your clients, and can you share some of the insights of what they're doing and how they're succeeding?
I think the happiest of our customers are the ones that knew what they wanted to achieve before they engaged us, started the deployment process. It could be a number of things that an organization tries to achieve. They might be targeting to achieve their ESG goals for the company, for the enterprise. They may be looking to reduce costs, especially operational costs or real estate costs, or they may be just trying to provide a space that's safe and with a health risk minimized, especially after COVID. Once you have a set of clear goals, then it's quite easy to identify the set of technology that you need and be able to see results through a pilot quite quickly. And definitely start small. Start with 1 or 2 offices. Experiment with the matrices, the parameters you're trying to measure your success by, and do it one step at a time before you do a large-scale rollout. I think that's the best way for you to get really support for a larger budget as well. And we have multiple enterprises that are doing it with us on a global scale, and for them, it's also quite important early on in the project planning phase to think about how, especially with hardware. I mean, software tends to have an easier job. You could download it globally, but hardware, there's a logistics problem. Every territory has a different safety criteria around the devices. They may have different importation rules. Some devices might not be available locally in the countries that you're trying to distribute deploy the product to. So make sure you work you work with a vendor that has this global logistics capability, not just to provide the products, and also be able to support it after deployment, because you're going to run into issues. You're going to run into conversations where you want to upgrade and expand the system. And that's when you need to engage with the partner, around the clock, around the globe, and also just pay attention to the regulation and also cultural issues around the workplaces. When you pick pilots, you might need to pick 1 or 2 offices in every geographic location, I mean, globally, just to make sure that the employees there are, give you feedback, enough feedback so you could adjust your plans, to tailor to local needs and local expectations.
Yeah, it's great feedback, especially on the global scale, right? So Lisa, the pandemic has caused kind of this new set of challenges for FMs. What are you seeing evolving in the future around this?
Yeah, it's interesting because nobody knows what the future holds. No one would expect it the last year and a half would have happened the way it did. We've definitely gone from one extreme of working in the office regularly to the other extreme of working from home for months. And it looks like we're now landing somewhere in between as we return to the workplace. And I think we'll continue to see things, kind of go back and forth between those 2 extremes over time. What I do know for certain is that facility managers are going to need to be prepared for those things to keep changing. Concerns about the right strategy even now differ throughout the world based on local conditions, and things will inevitably continue to change. So facility managers need to be able to make data-driven decisions and to do that quickly. To be informed, they need to be armed with the right tools to make the critical decisions. Moving from traditional office environments to activity-based workspaces, which need to be adaptable and keep people safe and engaged, that's going to require the right mix of tools. And getting access to the right data and trusting the accuracy of that data to make your informed decisions are going to be key to any flexible workplace strategy. So, advice is, prioritize your plans based on your business's specific needs and look at the data and the tools that you already have to determine what else you need to achieve your goals. The key to success will be to build resiliency into your facilities management and real estate strategies, and choosing the right technology to partners to support you throughout that ongoing journey.
It's a great point as well. But Lisa, are you seeing, when companies are looking at these initiatives and rolling out technology, it's interesting because what about data governance, right? So you're going to capture quite a bit of data in activity-based workplace, right? Even through technology, and as John said, even globally, and understanding that. But you're also going to look across the enterprise for a lot of this information and data. And to your point earlier, just the integration of technology makes that a lot easier. Are you seeing that companies are prepared and have a governance program in place, or do you think that is an opportunity for many companies?
I think that's definitely an opportunity. As you bring together different tools, different sources of data, you've got to understand what the data is, where it's coming from, how reliable is it. Also, that brings up then privacy and security concerns with the data. So it's important that as companies are selecting, whether it's software or hardware to work with, understanding what information will those tools be gathering, for example, hardware devices that might have cameras in them for monitoring occupancy. What are they doing with that video feed? Is it processing it on camera and therefore it's more secure and there's no personal information then being passed on? So looking at providers and whether they're GDPR compliant and compliant with other privacy and security policies is very important.
Yeah, and John, your point earlier, right? Picking that partner that really has that experience, because it is very different policies and regulations around the globe, and really understanding that is important so you can really harness them.
Yeah, I would like to add on to what Lisa just mentioned. For example, a lot of our clients are trying to introducing body temperature sensors scanner at entrances, and the regulations, health data related regulations, and just user expectations vary so widely geographically if you look across the globe. So there are regions where collecting body temperatures consider a personal private medical data that is subject to certain regulations, and there are regions where they're completely people don't care about the fact that you're taking temperature from them, and so I think that really you need to be able to try it in different regions and see the feedback, and then tune the model, and then grow from there.
Yeah, I mean, and even back to the activity base, right? People work differently around the globe, right? And in how they approach work and throughout the day. So having and harnessing that insight is going to be important. So actually, this brings us to our next poll. So we can ask the audience, hopefully, to participate in this poll as well. So when implementing new ways of working, such as activity-based working, what is your primary goal? Okay. Again, interesting results. So really to improve the workplace experience, right? Really around the individuals in the space, and then increasing, individual and teams productivity and reducing, sick, and then attracting and retaining the right individuals. So interesting that cost and ESG is not necessarily playing a factor for these decisions. So great feedback from the audience. So why don't we go ahead and move to questions? John, why don't we start with you? It looks like there's a question or a specific question coming in that's really around, what benefits can one expect from implementing, meeting rooms, scheduling, display panels that you talked about earlier, and what options in technologies are available, and what do they accomplish?
I think meeting room scheduling panels has a lot to do with the survey result the poll result. It's all about improving the work experience. Nowadays, if you look at photos during or around this time, around any modern workplace, oftentimes you see green lights or red lights around the entrances of meeting rooms. A lot of companies have already adopted these devices as part of their office routine. And if you think about your experience before having these room booking panels, people who want to go into meeting rooms worry that halfway into the meeting rooms, their colleagues might come in and with a reservation for the space and ask them to leave. Or when you are expecting to having a meeting with a visitor, as they come into the office, there's no available meeting rooms for you to go into. So the small screen outside of a meeting room really solves a lot of the workplace friction that existed just around the meeting activity. And you can imagine this problem will only exacerbate when we go into the age of activity-based workspaces, because after the pandemic, people would only come into the office with a specific goal that they want to accomplish. And it will be really unfortunate if they come into the office and unable to find a space that they need, the type of space that they need to do what they want to do. So reservations screens, scheduling screens for all kinds of spaces are in quite high demand these days. And in terms of technology, there's really a wide spectrum of what you can choose from. A lot of companies, maybe due to budget concerns, would start with a low-cost, maybe consumer-grade tablet, as I mentioned earlier, that simply displays the reservation information outside of the room. If you have a little bit more budget, you can look for a small display that doesn't come with a battery that would put you at risk after continuous charging, and also provide lights on the side, so the availability of the room is clearly visible, way before the employee approaches the meeting room. And also touching on this earlier, these screens can also integrate touchless sensors. So when people check into meetings and check out of the meetings, they could, instead of touching the screens, they could use their employee badge or their mobile phone to interact with. And also, it's quite important to implement this check-in and check-out mechanism, because it is a way for the enterprise to measure room utilization. So you could either have a sensor, or you could have people check into the room voluntarily to indicate that they are using the room. So you compare the actual usage against the reservation, then you can find out if there are people who reserve lots of rooms but end up not using them. We call them ghost meetings. These screens can definitely be integrated with sensors, so people can the screen can check people in and out without even asking them to take out their employee badge. And also recently, there is the integration of physical access control systems with these screens, so you can physically lock the rooms when they're not in use. So this is requested for rooms that are sensitive, maybe because of security, because of data sensitivity. So maybe clean rooms for software development, maybe a boardrooms in companies. You'll want to integrate the door lock directly with the room scheduling panel. So these are all a variety of technology choices that you have when you want to put the screen outside of the meeting room.
Appreciate it. Appreciate the answer. And that probably flows into our next question. Really kind of a comment, right? Many IoT sensors run on different Wi-Fi, and the individual agree that you should start with a goal. Keep in mind that it's important to research the technology. But I think this goes to even Lisa's point earlier around integration of that technology. And if you have a system in place that's more of an enterprise system, and you're incorporating some of these other technologies and integrating, Lisa, how do you go about evaluating, or how are your clients evaluating when they have an existing system and they want to add on additional technologies for specific goals that they have in their organization?
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of factors to consider. Because it's always difficult trying to connect up and integrate separate pieces of technology that weren't intended to work together. Some do it better than others. It's definitely, there's a lot of progress that's been made on integrating IoT devices and data into different software products so that you can mix and match things. The choices on the different IoT sensors, that was a really good point they were raising there about they work differently, they run on different frequencies. Sometimes you get too many of them into a building and onto the network, that can cause problems. So you really need a really good IT architect to really evaluate the impacts to your network, the impacts to your software, and determine how you're going to integrate the different pieces and put them all together into a cohesive solution. So that's also why I was suggesting that where you can, the more you can choose one solution that does a number of different things, you can reduce some of those integration costs. And sticking with an individual provider or a small number of providers for different things is usually simpler than picking up, for example, IoT devices from 10 different vendors. If you can stick to one or two, you're more likely to have ones that will behave well together inside your environment.
And even operationally managing that, break, fix, and implementation makes it a lot easier. So we did have a question. Will the recording of this webinar be available? Yes, it will. So please feel free to watch it many times, and also share it with your peers and information that's important. So Let's see. Next question that came in, John. This one's probably for you. You know, what benefits can one expect from collecting space occupancy data, and what tools are available to help generate insights on the data collected?
Yeah, as we touched on earlier, space occupancy data is a useful insight to help enterprises optimize their space usage. We can look at the days of the week that more employees tend to come in. Usually it's not on Fridays, and that could probably be provided as a guidance for people who want to avoid having too many people building with too many people at the same time. So if you're able to collect that data, it'll be useful guide for employees to schedule their visits to the office. And what we're finding is a new usage, especially in the activity-based workplace environment, because in the ABW environment, a lot of the spaces are cut for a specific number of size of team to work on, and a lot of times these spaces are adjustable. So the question becomes, what kind of what size of spaces do you actually need to best accommodate the needs of your teams? And this can vary quite widely geographically, and also between different functions of the company. So we have clients that are looking at actual usage data, occupancy data that's collected to guide them to find out whether it is the smaller meeting rooms that are being in higher demand, or it's the larger ones that are being needed, and whether they should partition up the larger spaces into smaller ones so they could accommodate more teams at the same time. And many sensor companies, they will provide you with their standardized data, but it's also quite important now to import these data in raw data forms into a variety of analytical tools that are also becoming available. And there's a lot of data visualization tools that are quite easy to access. Also, you could talk to your consultants, talk to your vendors about the possibility of linking that occupancy data into what we mentioned earlier, into energy control systems. So maybe using that data to adjust the level of air conditioning you need in the space, and lighting that you need in the space. And so these are all practical uses that I think that can be quite easily realized today with a experienced project team.
Yeah, and if I could just add on to that, historically people have checked on how spaces are being used just based on reservations. And as we know, reservations don't always equal people actually using a space. So the occupancy data gives you much more real-time, realistic view of how spaces are being used. And then gathering that data also gives you the ability to look for anomalies in it. So, besides the overall, as John was saying, being able to tell whether people are in, do you have steady numbers of people in the office, or does that fall off on Fridays, and therefore you'd want to suggest more people come in then to spread out the distribution of people. But as well, being able to detect, like, suddenly if a meeting room, if the usage of that meeting room declines significantly all of a sudden, that suggests to you that there's a problem, and maybe someone goes and investigates and discovers that somebody's taken all the chairs out of the room and stuffed them into other meeting rooms because they needed them, or the air conditioning's broken down and it's too warm, and word is spread but nobody's reported it. So having that real-time data and being able to get those insights about what's unusual, or also monitoring things like if you have spaces that are, say, for 10 people that are consistently over that, is that because there weren't enough bigger spaces available? Do you not have bigger spaces? Has the nature of the way people are working changed? So it's really can be quite useful having all of this data and then being able to get insights from it both based on what's actually happening and then what's happening that's outside the norm of what usually was happening.
I mean, that's a great feedback. Are you, when we look at today's environment, and we talked about the pandemic earlier and kind of the changes that we're seeing, are you seeing clients want to understand how the space is currently being utilized, knowing that it probably will change throughout the next 12 to 24 months until they actually get to more kind of stabilization of that space? Or what are you actually seeing in how they're interpreting that data? Is it more kind of trending lines than actually taking the information today and making changes to their space?
I think a lot of the data, they're collecting data today about how the space is being used, partly largely for health and safety reasons. So wanting to be able to monitor occupancy and take action if spaces are getting too crowded. That might lead to an immediate shift in how some of the space is organized so that you can, physically distance people much more. And also just, again, to get those trends that you can figure out longer term, because some people are reconfiguring offices immediately before people go back. And then you want to be able to monitor, if you spaced out individual seats so that everybody's 6 feet apart, you want to monitor how much of the seats being used, how often are people then going into other spaces where they can sit closer together because they're collaborating. And then as you're bringing more people back, that data helps you then plan what's the best configuration of the space to accommodate the people that you're going to have. And I think the key here is flexibility, and that this is going to keep changing. So you're going to want to always be monitoring that occupancy information and how the space is being used so that you can continue to adapt so that you're making the best use of the real estate that you're paying for.
And if I may add, I could also give an example of how occupancy data can contribute to improved employee experience and making them feel safer in this space. I think Lisa touched on that, keeping a safe occupancy level, but there's another application done by some of our clients. For example, just by having a display of occupancy inside of a meeting room, inside of a restroom right at the door, helps people avoid going to a already crowded restroom. So having displays like that just enables, it helps the employees feel that whatever space they're in is being watched. Number of people is limited to a safe level, and if the employer is paying so much attention to the occupancy, maybe they're also doing proper cleaning. So I think it's a gesture for the company to let the employees know that their safety, their health is being taken care of.
Terrific.
Yeah.
I just want to remind the audience one more time, go ahead and please submit your questions if you have anyone. Sorry, Lisa, you were going to say something.
Yeah, no, I was just going to add another example onto what John was saying. Another thing that we're seeing is a trend towards having a kiosk at the entrance to a floor that has the floor plan and then the heat map of the occupancy laid over it. Because then people can make their own personal choices of, do they want to go into an area where there are more people because maybe they're there at the office more to socialize and interact with other people, or is their preference to be much more distanced from other people and they're going to go pick an area of the floor that's quieter. So it's giving people that visibility into what's really happening in a space before they enter into it. Again, creating that feeling of well-being for employees.
Personalized, kind of employee-centric experience. So we have just a few minutes left. So I want to at least afford you the opportunity if we missed anything and you want to share anything with the audience. And then I also wanted to, if you could share how, if anyone in the audience wants to get in touch with either one of you, maybe has some more questions after this webinar, how would they go about doing that? So why don't we start with you, John, if we could? Maybe anything that you want to.
You could definitely. Yeah, definitely. Please do reach out to me by email, john.wang@IAdea.com. I'll be happy to answer.
Terrific. Anything you want to share that we didn't cover today in the webinar?
Well, I think we're talking about the different uses about the occupancy sensor. Just another easy example. You could have a display of, for example, in a multi-story building, you could easily have a sign at the entrance of the first floor showing the occupancy of each level. So the employee can directly go to the floor that has the least occupancy. There's something simple as that can do a lot for the employee experience. So yeah, I think it is an exciting space. There's definitely a lot of innovation.
Agreed. Lisa, how about you?
Yeah, I think the key is just keeping in mind that workplaces are going to be flexible now. And as you make changes, planning in that resiliency and that ability to change so that you can keep adapting as, you know, as the situation changes, as the needs of your employees change, you know, being able to react to that quickly and having the data to support those decisions. Yeah, and if anybody wants to get in touch and reach out, you can always go to ibm.com and, you know, look up IBM Tri-Riga and request to speak with someone. You can also reach out to me directly. My email address is barclay@ca.ibm.com. And then, you know, I'm on LinkedIn and Twitter as well.
Terrific. Well, I can't thank you both enough. I mean, just sharing your kind of knowledge with the audience, it's been terrific. And I know this is going to be very helpful for many of the facilities managers, how they're thinking about the space, how they're going to manage the space in the future, right? Really understanding the employee experience and the services that they need to provide, but also maintaining that space. So really appreciate your insights. Thanks again. And thanks to the audience for joining today. We really appreciate it. Again, reach out to Lisa and John if you have any questions. They're available and always willing to share their knowledge, as you can see by their participation, even in today's webinar. So stay safe, everyone, and thank you again for participating. Appreciate it.